The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the dark asphalt, cutting through the peaceful morning haze. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made bystanders stop and stare, unsure if they should intervene or just keep walking. A police officer, his uniform crisp and authoritative, stood with his arms crossed, his face twisted into a look of disdain. The man before him, wearing a neatly pressed military uniform, remained still, his hands in the air, his jaw clenched as he controlled his breathing. Before we continue, if you enjoy gripping stories that reveal the truth behind injustice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you stunned. License and registration, Officer Reed barked, his tone laced with suspicion. He didn't bother to hide his contempt as he glared at the black man sitting in the driver's seat of the sleek black sedan. The man's uniform, adorned with medals and insignias, meant nothing to the officer. All he saw was skin color. The man in the car calmly reached for his wallet, moving deliberately so there would be no misunderstanding. He had been in this situation before. Not exactly like this, but close enough. "My registration is in the glove compartment," he said, his voice measured, professional. "I said license and registration." Reed repeated, his fingers hovering near the holster on his belt. His partner, a younger officer named Evans, stood nearby, his expression uneasy. The driver exhaled slowly before handing over his license. "Here you go, officer." Reed snatched the ID without looking at it, his focus locked on the soldier's face. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. A few passers-by had started watching, their phones subtly raised, recording. The man inside the car hesitated. He had done nothing wrong, and he knew where this was headed. "Officer, is there a reason for this stop?" Reed narrowed his eyes. "Step out. Now." With the same composed demeanor, the man unbuckled his seatbelt and got out of the car. His uniform was impeccable, pressed with the kind of precision only years of discipline could instill. His boots shined under the morning sun. Even as he stood before the officer, he kept his shoulders squared, his posture strong. Reed smirked. "Where'd you steal that uniform, huh?" The crowd murmured. A woman gasped. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" The soldier's jaw tightened. "I didn't steal anything. I serve in the United States Army." Reed chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah? Then why don't I recognize you? You're out here impersonating a soldier, huh? You think slapping on a uniform gets you out of a traffic stop?" "I am Colonel David Carter," the man said, his voice firm. "United States Army. My ID is in my wallet." "You're holding it." Reed ignored him. "Hands behind your back." Evans hesitated. "Reed, maybe we should check his A. Now." Reed snapped. Colonel Carter, despite the anger rising in his chest, knew better than to resist. He turned around, placing his hands behind his back. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked into place. A murmur ran through the growing crowd. "This isn't right," someone said. "He's a soldier," another voice called out. But Reed was deaf to the protests. He had his prize. He had put a black man in handcuffs, and that was all that mattered. Then Carter spoke, his voice calm but chilling. "Officer, do you have any idea what you've just done?" Reed scoffed. "Yeah. I just arrested a fraud." Carter tilted his head, looking him straight in the eye. "Call your supervisor. Right now." Reed's smirk faltered. The crowd waited. "Call your supervisor," Carter repeated. Evans shifted uncomfortably. "Reed, maybe we should I said I've got this." Reed snapped. But Carter wasn't backing down. "You might want to do it sooner rather than later," he said. "Because in about 5 minutes, you're going to regret this decision more than anything in your life." The tension in the air was suffocating. People in the crowd murmured among themselves. More phones were out now, recording every second. Reed still wasn't fazed. "Yeah? And why's that?" Carter gave him a long, knowing look before saying 2 words that changed everything. "The Pentagon." Silence. Evans stiffened. Reed's face twitched. And then the radio on his shoulder crackled to life. "Dispatch to all units. We have a priority call from the Department of Defense. Immediate response requested." Carter smiled. "That's for you," he said. And suddenly Officer Reed wasn't so sure anymore. The radio crackled again. "Officer Reed, respond. Immediate priority from the Department of Defense." A tense silence hung in the air as Reed's face twitched. His grip on Carter's arm loosened slightly, but his pride kept him from backing down. Carter, still calm despite the handcuffs, turned slightly and spoke evenly. "You should answer that, officer. This situation is about to change." Before we continue, if you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth behind injustice. Because what happens next? You won't believe it. Reed swallowed hard and pressed the button on his shoulder radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Reed. What's the message?" "Static." Then a sharp voice cut through. You have a Colonel David Carter in custody. Confirm immediately. Reed hesitated, his confidence faltering. His gaze darted to Carter, who stared back with unwavering patience. Yeah. Got him detained for impersonating an officer. Over. Silence. Then, a different voice, colder, sharper. You have made a serious mistake, officer. Hold your position. Do not transport him anywhere. A federal unit is en route to your location. Stand by. Reed's face paled. The weight of his mistake started to settle in. A federal unit? The Department of Defense? Evans, standing nearby, cleared his throat. Reed, we need to uncuff him. Now. But Reed's pride wouldn't let him. He had to be right. This is ridiculous. They don't send feds for some random guy pretending to be a soldier. Carter, still handcuffed, smiled slightly. Maybe you should check my ID now, officer. Reed hesitated, then pulled Carter's wallet from his pocket, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the military credentials, the Department of Defense seal, and then his stomach dropped. Name, Colonel David Carter. Rank, United States Army Special Operations Command. The weight of reality hit him like a freight train. He had just arrested a highly ranked officer. A man who likely had direct contacts at the highest levels of government. Evans took a step forward, whispering, Reed, this is bad. Reed's hand tightened around the ID, his mind racing. How is he going to fix this? Carter, reading the turmoil in Reed's face, spoke with the quiet authority of a man who had been in real battles, not power-hungry roadside altercations. Now that you know who I am, I suggest you uncuff me. Immediately. The crowd, sensing the shift, murmured louder. Some were still recording, others whispering in disbelief. Reed glanced around, panic creeping in. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He was the one in control. He was the law here. He could still save face. No, he muttered under his breath. Carter raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. Reed straightened up, forcing authority into his voice. I still have probable cause. Evans' jaw dropped. Reed, are you serious? We need to let him go. But Reed wasn't listening. His hands shook slightly as he kept his grip on his belt. You were speeding, Reed blurted out. Carter just stared at him, unimpressed. That's your excuse? The radio crackled again. Federal Unit 1 minute out. Hold all civilians at the scene. This is now a military jurisdiction. Reed blinked, his throat dry. Military jurisdiction? Then the low hum of powerful engines filled the air. A sleek black SUV and 2 armored vehicles came speeding down the road, kicking up dust. Civilians backed away, eyes wide as the vehicles screeched to a halt. The doors flew open. 4 men in dark suits, earpieces in, stepped out first. Behind them, a high-ranking military officer, his uniform crisp, his stars gleaming, emerged. He locked eyes with Carter. Colonel. Carter gave him a respectful nod. General. Reed barely had time to process before the general turned to him, his face like stone. You just made the biggest mistake of your career. Reed's heart pounded. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Evans took a step back, wisely distancing himself from the disaster about to unfold. The general's gaze flickered to Carter's wrists, still cuffed. He turned back to Reed. You have 5 seconds to take those cuffs off before I have you arrested for unlawful detention of a federal officer. Reed's entire world tilted. He had lost control. And now, the real consequences were about to begin. Reed's hands trembled as he fumbled with the handcuffs. His fingers felt stiff, his mind spinning. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The murmuring crowd watched in stunned silence as he finally managed to unlock the cuffs. The metal clinked against Carter's wrists before falling away. Carter slowly rolled his shoulders, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been. His face remained calm, unreadable. Too calm. That scared Reed more than anything. Before we continue, if this story has you hooked, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The general, his posture rigid and eyes burning with barely contained fury, stepped forward until he was inches from Reed's face. The sheer authority in his presence was suffocating. Officer Reed, he said slowly, do you realize the gravity of what you've done today? Reed swallowed hard. Sir, there was probable cause to. The general's hand shot up, silencing him instantly. You don't speak unless I ask you a question. Is that clear? Reed nodded stiffly, his pulse hammering in his throat. Carter, standing beside the general, folded his arms. His gaze never left Reed, and in that moment the officer felt small. The power dynamic had completely shifted. The general turned toward Carter. "Colonel, do you wish to press formal charges against this officer?" The question sent a shockwave through the onlookers. Someone gasped. Reed's breath hitched. Carter exhaled slowly, as if considering the weight of the decision. The crowd waited, eyes darting between him and Reed. The entire trajectory of Reed's career depended on the next few words Carter spoke. Finally, Carter's gaze hardened. "I want his badge." The silence was deafening. Evans stiffened. Reed's entire body went cold. "Wait, what?" Reed croaked. Carter took a step closer, his voice controlled but firm. "You detained me illegally. You disrespected a U.S. Army officer. You assumed that because of the color of my skin, I was a criminal instead of a decorated serviceman. And if that wasn't enough, even after knowing who I was, you refused to back down. That's not just bad policing. That's a disgrace to the uniform you wear." Reed's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The general nodded. "Agreed. Officer Reed, you are officially relieved of duty pending an internal investigation. Hand over your badge and gun." The crowd erupted into whispers. Reed looked to Evans, silently pleading for backup, but Evans only took another step back. He wasn't about to go down with him. "I know. You can't do this." Reed's voice cracked. "This is a setup." The general didn't flinch. "Your career is over. Your only choice now is whether you leave the scene quietly or in handcuffs." For the first time, Reed felt what it was like to be powerless. His jaw clenched. His fingers hesitated on the clasp of his badge. His entire life had been spent controlling others, commanding respect. And now, in a matter of minutes, it had been ripped away. Slowly, shakily, he removed his badge and his service weapon. The general took them without a word. The crowd, still watching, broke into applause. Carter smirked. "How does it feel, officer?" Reed didn't answer. His face burned with humiliation. The general motioned toward the black SUVs. "You'll be escorted to headquarters for a full debrief. I strongly suggest you comply." Reed's mind screamed at him to fight, to argue, to do something, but it was over. He knew it. His career, his authority, his reputation, gone. As he was led away, Carter watched him go, then turned to Evans. "You should think about what kind of cop you want to be," he said. Evans, face pale, nodded stiffly. Carter took one last look at the scene before climbing into the general's vehicle. As the SUV pulled away, he closed his eyes and exhaled. This wasn't justice, but it was a start. As the black SUV sped away, Carter finally allowed himself to relax. The tension in his muscles eased, but the weight in his chest remained. This wasn't over. He stared out the window, watching the world blur past. Civilians still stood on the roadside, their faces a mix of shock and admiration. Some had cheered when Reed lost his badge. Others had filmed every second. It didn't matter. What mattered was the systemic issue this exposed. If you're still here, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. This story isn't just about one bad cop. It's about something much bigger. And what happens next? It's about to get even more intense. Carter shifted in his seat, turning toward the general. "What now?" The general exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Now we clean up the mess." Carter frowned. "Meaning?" The general's expression darkened. Officer Reed wasn't acting alone. Silence. Carter's grip tightened. "Explain." The general glanced at the agents sitting across from them, then back at Carter. "We've been watching that department for months. Corruption, racial profiling, excessive force. Reed was just the most reckless. There are others, higher-ups, who protect officers like him." Carter's stomach turned. He had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed was different. "We're moving in on them," the general continued. "But we need your help." Carter raised an eyebrow. "My help? How?" The general's eyes locked onto his. "By making an example out of Reed." Carter leaned back, considering. He had already humiliated the man. Was that enough? No, not even close. Reed wasn't the disease, he was a symptom. Carter nodded. "All right, what do you need?" The general handed him a tablet. This is everything we've compiled on Reed and his unit. Excessive force complaints, racial bias reports, body cam footage that was accidentally deleted but later recovered. Carter scrolled through the files. It was worse than he thought. One case stood out. A young black man, unarmed, pulled over for a broken taillight. Beaten so badly he spent a week in the hospital. The officers claimed he resisted. The footage said otherwise. And Reed? He was leading the charge. Carter's jaw clenched. How is he still on the force? The general sighed. Internal Affairs buried it. Said there wasn't sufficient evidence to pursue disciplinary action. Carter stared at the screen. We're changing that. The general nodded. We're holding a press conference tomorrow. You're speaking at it. Carter looked up, surprised. Me? You're the perfect voice for this, the general said. A high-ranking black officer who experienced racial profiling firsthand? Your testimony will shake the system. Carter's pulse quickened. He had never sought the spotlight, but this wasn't about him. This was about every soldier, every black man, every person who had been harassed by those meant to protect them. He nodded. I'll do it. The general smiled, satisfied. Good, because after this, we're going after everyone who let this happen. Carter turned back to the window, watching the city skyline appear in the distance. Tomorrow, everything would change. For Reed, for his department, and maybe, just maybe, for the entire country. The next morning, Carter stood behind a podium, his heart pounding as he stared out at the sea of reporters. The flashing cameras, the murmuring crowd. It was all leading to this moment. To the side, the general stood tall, his arms crossed. A few feet away, Evans lingered near the edge of the stage, his expression unreadable. And beyond them, Officer Reed, now stripped of his badge, sat in the front row, forced to watch his downfall unfold. If you've been following this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear will shake the entire system. Carter gripped the edges of the podium and took a steady breath. I am Colonel Anthony Carter of the United States Army, he began, his voice steady but firm. And yesterday, I was unlawfully detained by a police officer who saw my skin color before my uniform. The audience fell silent. Carter's gaze swept across the crowd. This isn't just about me. This is about the countless men and women, black, brown, and otherwise, who have suffered at the hands of those who swore to protect them. It's about a system that allows men like Officer Reed to operate unchecked. Carter paused, letting his words sink in. Then he turned to the general, who gave him a slight nod. Time to drop the hammer. Carter tapped a button on the podium, and the large screen behind him flickered to life. A series of police reports, body cam footage, and official complaints appeared for the world to see. Evidence. The crowd gasped. Murmurs turned to outright outrage as they saw what had been hidden for years. Footage of Reed slamming an unarmed black teenager against a patrol car. Reports of him falsifying charges to justify his brutality. A pattern of racial bias that went unchecked by his superiors. Carter turned back to the microphone. This is what happens when corruption is left to fester. This is why people don't trust law enforcement. And this is why we will no longer be silent. The reporters fired off questions, but Carter wasn't finished. As of this morning, Officer Reed is officially under investigation by the Department of Justice. But it doesn't stop there. He turned to the general. The older man stepped forward. Multiple officers in Reed's department have been implicated in a cover-up. Arrests will be made, and this will not be swept under the rug. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Others looked on in disbelief. Carter's gaze shifted to Reed, whose face was pale. For the first time, he was the one without power. A bitter part of Carter wanted to enjoy the moment, to revel in Reed's fear. But he didn't. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Carter took a final breath and leaned into the microphone. Change starts today. The crowd roared. And somewhere, deep in his soul, Carter knew this was just the beginning.